Hello, this is Dr. Hausinger. This lecture is based off of Chapter 8 in your SAC book, Working with Families. And just as a mention, this is one of my favorite topics, and it's something that I had specialized in and spent most of my time in the addiction counseling field as a family counselor. Okay, so our objectives are to describe the 6 ways families influence substance use behavior, describe the counselor's role in helping families decide among treatment alternatives, compare confrontation, disengagement, and craft approaches to family therapy, contrast 6 general approaches to family therapy, discuss the effects of parental substance abuse on children development, and identify 4 questions essential to providing multicultural family counseling. People influence their social environments and are influenced by them in return. When they develop substance abuse problems, the issues are not limited to them alone, but affect all of their social systems. At the same time, these systems have a reciprocal effect on the maintenance or resolution of the problem. There is a addiction specialist from Washington State. Her name is Dr. Claudia Black. She's a social worker, and she specializes in family addiction, and she has several different videos and books out, and one of them is called The Domino Effect, and that's her way of saying that everything that one domino does affects the rest of the dominoes, and she specifically looks at the effects of addiction on children and family recovery. Okay, so there are 6 different interactions related in a review from McCready, and so we're going to look at these. Persons with alcohol and other drug disorders live in and have relationships with a network of family and friends. Okay. We're usually not in a vacuum drinking in the closet by ourselves. We usually have people around us. Family relationships may protect against the development of alcohol or drug problems. So this is true for suicidality and substance use. This would be considered a protective factor. Families and others close to the drinker or drug user may contribute to the development and maintenance of substance use disorders. So it could also be a risk factor. Families and others close to drinkers and drug users play a role in helping a user recognize a problem and seek help. Families and others close to drinkers and drug users have a significant impact on the change process and treatment success. Families and others close to drinkers or drug users play an important role in the maintenance of change. So there's several different approaches. Within family systems approach, there are different tiers of this. Okay. Right. And this is that the family is the primary context in which the child learns and develops. So the family is first where we learn to be a person, and we learn our family's norms, and we learn how to communicate, and we learn what's acceptable or what's not acceptable within the context of our family. So within family systems, we do a lot of defining, getting to know how the family functions, what our boundaries are, etc. Okay. Right. A little bit later on, we're going to talk about the addictive family roles, and you have that in your Moodle model for this week. One of the approaches within family systems is the Brief Strategic Family Therapy, or BSFT, which is a program designed for adolescents and their families that focuses on the context within an adolescent's behavior takes place. Specifically, social influences and how they are important and impact the adolescent's behaviors. Okay, because it's critically powerful during those years of childhood and adolescence. The BSFT approach asserts that the counselor will not be able to understand the adolescent's drug-abusing behavior without understanding what is going on in the various contexts in which he or she lives. Drug-abusing behavior does not happen in a vacuum. It exists within an environment that includes family, peers, neighborhood, and the cultures that define the rules, values, and behaviors of the adolescent. Okay. And within that, family therapy is the primary mechanism for change in the adolescent substance use and related behaviors. Okay. We have multidimensional family therapy, or MFT, which focuses on family therapy as a pathway to adolescent well-being. So a lot of the things that you'll see with systemic family therapy, sorry, it's my cat deciding to walk across the keyboard, is that we have to look at the family. We don't look at the person with the addiction as being the problem within the family. We look at everybody's reactions and actions within context of one another. So it's also important that we separate the behavior from the self-worth of the person. Okay? Like, you broke my family, you did this. If you weren't in such trouble all the time, our marriage would be okay. You're gonna maybe hear a lot of that coming from the family until we figure out what's going on, redefine some boundaries, and then re-educate the family on how they interact and how everything interplays together. Okay. In behavioral couples counseling, we emphasize the family context as a focus for change. And we focus on changing the family systems, making it very clear, helping a family transform from a system that supports substance abuse to one that supports healthy alternatives. And it can be quite challenging. Okay. And what we do within systems theory is we're really teaching people skills. So if we have maladaptive coping mechanisms or communication mechanisms, such as yelling, blaming, violence, etc., then part of our job is to establish new boundaries, help the family establish their own boundaries, and teach new skills that are adaptive. Within systems theory, we look at living organisms are open systems and that they interact with their environment, taking in and discharging information or energy through boundaries that are sufficiently permeable to allow those transactions to take place. And the system also has subsystems which interact in a predictable manner within the context of the larger family system. Okay, so one of the biggest problems that you'll see with families and couples is a partner that might not know how to handle addiction might say, I hate it when you lie to me because you're using. If you lie to me again, I'm breaking up with you. Well, if the addicted person is fearing that they're going to be homeless and fearing that they're going to lose the best relationship that they've had or lose their relationship, this type of talk is going to potentially drive that lying further. Well, of course they're going to lie and try to preserve themselves so that they don't lose the relationship and that they don't lose everything. Okay? So that's kind of what I mean by the domino effect, okay? And how we have to learn new communication skills instead of repeating this cycle of lying and hopes and all of that. Okay. So how do we make initial changes? At the start of the treatment, the counselors often aid family members in deciding between 3 paths of action. Okay. Confrontation. You might have seen the television show Intervention. This is an example of that, where the family and friends might gather around and it might be secret, ambush the person and read letters, and the goal would be to get the person to go into treatment. Now, some people would say that interventions are 100% effective, not because the person always goes to treatment, they always don't, but because through working with a therapist, the family and loved ones are educated about boundaries and enabling behaviors and get on the same page, and that often affects the person's behavior in the long run. So family healing can start even if the loved one is still choosing to use. Okay. Families who are involved in the process of confrontation might see the promise of treatment as an end result, but the oversimplification is a serious shortcoming. The overriding purpose of the intervention is to make a convincing case that substance abuse is the root cause of the problems affecting the individual and the family, and to present treatment as an immediately available solution. Unfortunately, the approach oversimplifies the problem attribution, conceptualizing issues in linear cause and effect terms. When family members see treatment as a happy ending, they may fail to recognize the need to make systemic changes that are essential to long-term help. An ultimatum can shatter lives if it doesn't bring about the immediate change being sought. A family must be prepared with an understanding of the risks involved in this undertaking. So, and it is important to know that interventions are a business. You can be registered and certified as a board-registered interventionist. Families often pay $3,000 or more sometimes 1,500. I would say the range might be like 1,500 to 5,000. Sometimes that fee is waived if the family has agreed to send that person to the treatment center. Okay. Um, and then on the show you'll see people being flown away to fancy um, resort treatments, which are a part of big business, and you can do an intervention yourself for free. You don't necessarily need to pay somebody thousands of dollars to do it. Okay. Disengagement is another form, which is where we interrupt the patterns of substance abuse through family disengagement. This is where family members may need to begin the change process without the participation of the substance abuser. Sometimes these shifts happen when family members seek out their own treatment through programs like Smart Recovery Family or Nar-Anon and Al-Anon. And as family members begin to take care of themselves, the family structure is no longer built solely on a foundation of substance abuse. As family members begin to refocus away from the substance abuse and from the energy it takes to maintain secrecy, they can seek the support that they may require. Sometimes loved ones become addicted to the person's addiction and they give up their whole lives, and parents become managers, probation officers, the banker. They track their adult children's cell phones. They bail them out of jail. They never get any sleep because they sleep with their phone on them. It can become a full-time job, and they give up taking care of themselves and their own health. Okay. So when family members start to reclaim their boundaries and don't drop at any moment because their child is in continuous crisis, then we do see that domino effect happening. And then we have skills training, which is where usually through the help of a counselor, a professional, we learn skills for changing the environment in ways to make the user change treatment. Okay. And we have craft training, community reinforcement, and family training, which teaches concerned significant others how to make changes in their own behaviors so that they reinforce positive changes in the substance user's drug or alcohol use, rather than focusing their attention on the most problematic situations. And reviews have shown that it can be effective with after just 4 or 5 sessions. And the resources for this are at the end of this chapter. Okay. Moving on to different approaches to family therapy. These are based off of psychological schools of thought. So, of course, you have psychodynamic therapy, which was founded by Dr. Freud, which largely focuses on the individual. They do have group therapy, but it was largely developed as individual counseling. It's based on the psychoanalytic process. It emphasizes the effects of the individual pathologies onto the family. So if you remember Psychology 101 and looking at Freudian theory, there's a lot of early childhood stuff that is covered, and looking at coping mechanisms and defense mechanisms like projection, etc. Okay. And experiential or humanistic therapy, which is also called person-centered therapy, we look at the feelings and especially self-esteem, okay, and look at the shape and the context of the family. And this is where we might look at the dysfunctional communication styles. So in this week's Moodle module, I have the 12 blocks to listening, or 12 blocks to effective communication, which we usually teach to families within a rehab setting and practice these through role play so that they we couple that with assertive counseling, and then we practice the assertive models of speaking, so that they can practice, but also so that they can recognize which of the blocks they might be more prone to do. We all have our favorite listening barriers. Bowen family system theory is based on the concepts of differentiation, triangulation, and multi-generational transmission processes. And so here we really see things like double binds. We really get into the different dynamics with families, looking at enmeshment and fusion. So if families are fused, they show intense fusion, versus differentiation as being more adept at being interdependent. And so people generally pick partners that have similar levels of differentiation or fusion. So here we see things like enmeshment, which could also look like codependency, extreme codependency. Okay. The poorly differentiated family, according to Bowen, will tend to subject to one of several common symptoms: marital conflict, dysfunction in one spouse, or the projection of problems onto children. Okay. So in something like that, we might look at having our clients do family genograms and look at different patterns. If you took 400, we did a family genogram. Structural family therapy has had a major impact on family practice, and I use the word enmeshed. You'll see similarities. This is really from the structural family therapy. An enmeshed family system is characterized by an absence or clear boundaries between its subsystems and by a complete lack of distance among family members. Okay. So it's a strong systems-oriented approach focused on the family structure and how those moving parts interact. Within this, we see the counselor imitating the communication style of the family and taking a position of leadership, and then starting the therapy from there through confrontation of the family's views of the problem by moving attention from the individual symptom bearer to the family system. So again, that's where our context is. Communication models focus on active methods for changing repetitive communication patterns between family members. So this is kind of the opposite of the psychodynamic approach. The communication approach focuses on active members changing repetitive communication patterns between family members, so trying to end feedback loops that are not helpful. Once the problem has been redefined in terms that make it solvable, the therapist develops a strategy unique to the needs of the specific family system. And then we have behavioral family therapy, which is a social learning approach focused on attention to specific measurable behaviors. And that's key right there. Measurable behaviors and measurable goals. The founder of this sees the system as interlocking reciprocal behaviors. So again, everything is based within the context of the family. There's been a lot of research done on effects of children in homes, and that brings us to the addicted family roles. Claudia Black is very big on that, and you'll also see this probably at any treatment center that you go to, and people can move throughout the roles as well. So this week, please go ahead and look over that document. Children in homes with substance abuse often have inconsistency and weak boundaries, or the opposite, they've taken on adult responsibilities way too soon. And children also tend to either reject those patterns or repeat them. We also know from the research that different substances affect children differently. So children in homes with alcoholic parents are at risks that might be a little bit different from children at homes with parents that are using or dealing methamphetamine or hard or illicit drugs. Counseling children living in a substance abuse home environment should focus on providing empathy and developing effective coping skills. So one of the questions that comes up here is, if you look at families, oftentimes you'll see, let's say both parents are addicts or alcoholics, and one child follows in that path and the other child completely rejects that and becomes very successful. Why? Why is that? One of the X factors might be resiliency. Well, how can we teach resiliency? What is it? And why are some people more inherently prone to being resilient than others? And can you teach resiliency skills? And you can. Again, by reducing risk factors and increasing protective factors. But some people just inherently have that in them. It's our missing link. Okay. So looking at multicultural competence, this is something that allows a counselor to see clients through a client's eyes, and this is why it's so important to continuously read, learn, watch documentaries, experience new cultures, talk to new people from different cultures. And you always have the diversity and multicultural training requirements. Effective counselors are able to see past their own history, attitude, and bias, and this is an ongoing thing. You might develop biases as your career continues. And so this is a constant conversation that you'll have with yourself and perhaps your supervisor as issues come up. Counselors should avoid imposing their own assumptions on clients with differing values. And if something is really bothering you, it's an opportunity for you to reflect and perhaps seek your own counseling or just a sounding board, maybe your supervisor, that you can explore these things so that you can still be an effective counselor. A good start to overcoming bias is to ask clarifying questions regarding a client's home life and history. And most people I found are pretty open if you ask them, and using those good motivational interviewing skills. And also, if you don't know a lot about a culture, clients generally will be interested in telling you a little bit about, but you can also seek out cultural events or talk to somebody. And this is where building a good professional network can come in handy. So the ethics involved in family counseling, we have to remember that our ethical codes are related to all of our clients and their families. And we do need to look at, our limitations with confidentiality. So duty to warn, duty to protect, right? Someone's at risk to themselves or others. And we're charged with upholding the professional relationship, confidentiality, privacy, professional competence, proper assessments and evaluations, and using ethical decision-making tools. And if you do have a family of a particular culture, and there's another counselor there, for example, Native American clients respond well to Native American counselors, especially elders. So if your agency is big enough, or if you're able to, it's really important to employ people from different backgrounds and then match your clients up accordingly for best possible outcomes in respect of their culture. Okay. So in the last couple pages of this chapter, there are competencies and knowledge, skills, and attitudes that are discussed. I'd like you to look these over. There's a lot of things that the counselor has to do and has to know, but it can be a lot of fun, I think, to do family counseling. It's a lot like group counseling, but you get inside someone's family and really see what their life is like and can help them. All right, Dr. Hausinger out.